day we take our last breath, science and the way we use it touches every one of us. Science has given immense power to save and nurture life. And the pace of change is so great that we don't often take time to stop and appreciate how far we've come. That's why I want to share with you 10 of the most important scientific advances of our time and reveal some of the things that might just lie ahead. At the end of the program, I'll be asking you to vote for the advance you think has done the most to change your world. This had a massive impact on our society. It's really changed your life, doesn't it? So you're the perfect bionic woman.
Yeah.
And the winner, well, it's up to you. The last 50 years has seen science transform our world. In half a century, it's tackled countless diseases, put men on the moon, and completely changed the way we communicate. These are my top 10 advances. Some things you may expect, others you may find a bit more surprising. The first advance to take place in my top 10 almost didn't make it, because it's very nearly too old.
There are some women who prefer at least to pretend they're not interested in it and like to be approached by the man.
But for all its great age, it's made a lot of people extremely happy.
How I lost my virginity. God, my mother and mother fits. We had a race, me and this girl, to see who could have it. It off first. It was terrible. But we were having a wonderful time. She's got it. Yeah, baby, she's got it.
When I was a medical student, which is longer ago than I actually care to mention, there was a revolution which some people claim transformed our society. It was, of course, the contraceptive pill. In 1961, the pill was released in Britain.
The day is printed by the side of every pill, and providing she can remember what day it is, a woman can be quite sure whether or not she has taken today's pill. The manufacturers do their best to make them foolproof. They don't want to lose their reputation over what might be called pilot's error.
Today we take it for granted, but for that first generation, it was revolutionary.
I was a student teacher during that time, and it got round in college that there was a certain doctor in Doncaster that would give the pill, and so we all made a beeline for that.
Interestingly enough, all of the patients, we were all called Mrs. Yeah, when you were called in to see the doctor, you were Miss. Even there.
We knew that there was one private clinic, except you had to pay for it, so I had to take a paper round.
The pill exploded onto the scene at a time of great social upheaval, and itself became a huge part of that change.
I felt quite liberated. Just to be free of that fear of becoming pregnant was amazing.
I was aware that I was taking control of my own life.
There was lots of things in the newspapers about, the pill and it'll make women tarty and everything, it wasn't like that for me. I could plan my children and my career, which was so important to me.
But what nobody foresaw was that the pill meant that more women have tended to leave childbearing later and risk infertility. But that freedom to plan has, on balance, changed most people's lives for the better. For that reason, the pill has to be in my top 10. It's tiny, but it's had a massive impact on our society. Its liberating influence has been one of the most important advances in the last 50 years. Just as the pill transformed women's lives in the 1960s, science is changing our relationship with contraception again. Bill and Rachel are just about to start a trial for a new contraceptive that doesn't need to be taken every day. You've had 3 children.
Yes.
And you got pregnant while you're on the pill each time.
Yeah, nothing to do with the pill, just to do with us.
You didn't take it properly.
That's the one.
So what methods of contraception have you tried then?
We've tried abstinence, we've tried, because he was in the Navy, so that worked for a while, with him going away. Tried condoms very briefly in the beginning.
And why didn't you want to take the pill anymore?
I'm crap at taking it, I'm really not good at taking it. And I'd be relieved to not have different kinds of chemicals and the stress of knowing I've forgotten.
And you didn't mind your husband having the chemicals?
No, flash on. I think it'd be great for him to take some responsibility.
The contraceptive they're about to try is actually for Bill, not Rachel. Now I know what you might be thinking, and if I were a woman, I might not trust a man, even a reliable fireman like Bill, to take the pill either. But this pill is actually a course of injections, which will leave Bill temporarily infertile. So what on earth made you take part in this trial?
For me, it's just about being able to take over the role of contraception from Rachel and me being responsible for that, rather than it all being left to Rach.
And did the side effects that they talk about on the male contraception worry you?
There are a few side effects that they did warn us about, like weight gain, acne, irritability.
Didn't they tell you might develop breasts?
Yes.
He did say that.
Yes.
Because you're a farmer, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Did you discuss it with your mates at work?
Strangely, no.
What?
I mean, the ribbon I'll get, never mind.
It was a really macho thing, isn't it?
It is, I suppose, it's fertility at the end of it, and a guy like, I'm really butch.
And do you understand the science of how it actually works?
I don't.
Would you like to know?
Yes, please.
Right. Let me explain it to you. It's actually quite surprising, and in some ways it's not dissimilar from the female pill, the oral contraception that women take. And essentially, it really works in the brain. So if this is a body, the brain sends out a signal to make an egg or make sperm. Okay. Now, the pill is a hormone essentially which inhibits the brain by telling it the egg's already being made when it's not being made. So the brain thinks that the woman's ovulating, so it stops sending the message. Okay, and that's exactly actually what happens with the male contraception too. So if you're given the male hormone, okay, that tells the brain I'm making lots of sperm, so it just shuts down. So it's quite an elegant idea. And that feedback is one of the most, I think, interesting examples in biology of how the body works. The idea is that the injections will deal with Bill's biological feedback for months at a time.
This is your idea.
So the first entry on my list is the pill, revolutionary in the 60s, and still reinventing itself almost 50 years later.
Success? Fantastic.
My next advance has also had a dramatic impact on our lives. In fact, it's so significant that it's played a part in almost all of the other inventions on my list. When I was a schoolboy, I worked in a radio factory. I was paid £5 a week by Mr. Ben Zimra, a princely sum, to solder little components onto a printed circuit board like this. Little did I realise that across the Atlantic, a man was going to revolutionise the whole process. An engineer called Jack Kilby found a way to shrink all these components into one extraordinary and tiny thing. It's this, the humble microchip. And since its invention 50 years ago, there's been more medical and scientific progress than in any other period in human history. The microchip has to be in our top 10. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, it affects every part of our lives. Without the microchip, there would be no laptop, no cash card, no mobile phone. In short, without the microchip, we'd still be living in the 1970s. It amazes me that today, all those elements of the old electronic circuit board I soldered together as a schoolboy can only be seen down a microscope. And now, the technology is set to make it even smaller. I'm in the London Centre for Nanotechnology, where they make the smallest particles that are possible to be made. And the reason why I'm wearing the garb is because any skin cell in the atmosphere would contaminate what they do. And here on my fingertip is a little electronic chip. On this chip, they can fit 50 million transistors. This, the next generation of mini miracles, is as small as it gets. For now, each electronic component in these circuits is smaller than a virus. And that miniaturization means that chips, like viruses, are getting closer to us than we could have possibly imagined. Here's the thing. This microchip is made of a substance which is entirely edible, so when you swallow it, it gets dissolved by the acid in your stomach, and it sends a signal to a plaster on your arm, and the plaster has got this little device like a radio, and if you haven't taken your pill, I get a message on my phone saying, you haven't taken your pill today. But there's a darker side to all technology. The sheer proliferation of the microchip does bring some concerns. It's worth considering that within 50 yards of where I'm standing, in Piccadilly Circus, there must be at least 50 surveillance cameras recording every movement we make, amassing a huge amount of data over which we have no control. How we deal with these issues is an increasing challenge. Storage of personal data is largely unregulated, and fraud, theft, and loss of privacy in the virtual world worries many people. But in spite of all this, the chip is on my list. And we shouldn't forget that without it, many of the other advances wouldn't have been possible, including this next one. At number 3 on my list is a device in whose story I, or rather my rabbit Wilhelmina, played here by an actor, had a starring role. Well, a role anyway. I met some physics friends in the bar having a beer one evening, and they said, look, we've just built this machine with lots of wire and string and sealing wax and an old television screen, and it's called a magnetic resonance image machine, and would you like to put your rabbit in it? So we went down to the sub-basement of Hammersmith Hospital, and we put Wilhelmina gently into the machine. I was a bit worried about it, and then after 20 minutes of cooking, we got a photograph. And it looks a bit like this. Just a blur. And I didn't have the sense to realize that this was going to be quite revolutionary in its time. I think my pet rabbit was one of the first living organisms to be photographed like this. And the technology, which was then in its infancy, went on to become the MRI scanner. For much of my career in medicine, X-rays were the most effective way of looking inside the human body. but they didn't give a particularly clear image of all the organs beyond our bones. MRI scanning changed all that. Engineers first used MRI to look inside metals. Now we're able to see directly into living tissues, and that's given amazing new insights into the most complicated organ in the human body. I find it really rather humbling that this space, this inanimate object, this brain was once the place where somebody felt angry, felt sad, and loved. And the extraordinary thing is that until quite recently, we had no idea how it was really working. Exciting research at the University of Cambridge is using the MRI scanner to see how the mind works.
Robert, hello, nice to see you.
In the scanner next door is a willing volunteer I've never met.
I want you to face this way.
Right, not to look in the window.
Don't look in the window.
I can't see your subject. By asking some simple yes or no questions, I'm going to try to find out a bit about him or her.
If the person in the scanner is trying to convey a yes, you're going to see a bright red area of activity around his premotor cortex and a supplementary motor area right at the top in the middle of the head, yeah. If the person in the scanner is trying to convey a no, what you'll see is the same area of the brain will be lighting up, but it'll be a blue-greeny colour.
Are you a man?
There you go. I'm pretty confident this person is conveying a yes at this stage.
Are you over 6 foot high? He's now got a green area, so this is signaling a no answer, which would mean that actually this person, this man, is not 6 foot high. He's shorter than 6 foot. We can't actually see the brain think yes or no. That would be too difficult even for an MRI machine. What our volunteer was asked to do was to imagine playing tennis when he wants to say yes. And when he does, the area of the brain which deals with movement, his motor cortex, shows increased activity. And that is easy for the MRI to see. And this is our last question. Do you have facial hair? Again, pretty obvious activation. I would say that this guy's either got a beard or a moustache. Hi, thank you so much. I'm Robert Winterson, how do you do? Well, you're certainly not 6 foot high, you got that right. One recent study using this technique has given us an insight into communication with some patients in what was thought to be a permanent vegetative state.
We've seen a patient recently, a road traffic injury, who'd actually been in that situation for 5 years, and he was able to use this technique to convey yes and no responses to us. Certainly not the case for all patients, but we now know there are a subgroup of these patients who probably can do more than we think they can.
It's quite scary, isn't it? Do you not find that really quite amazing, but also sort of very on the edge of our humanity?
It is. I mean, it is something that many people find quite difficult to think about, the idea that you could be trapped inside your body and unable to communicate. And hopefully we've found a way that some of these patients can get around that issue.
And essentially what you're measuring is changes in blood flow.
We're basically looking at the areas of the brain that are working hardest. They're drawing blood which is delivering oxygen, and that's what we're measuring.
I mean, I couldn't look at somebody with this machine and say, he thinks I'm a complete moron.
No, I mean, that might be true, but at least you won't know that. That's a good thing.
Undoubtedly, the MRI machine has been the most important way of seeing how our brain works, and that alone qualifies it as one of the most significant advances in the last 50 years. But what really makes it stand out for me is its extraordinary ability to transform lives through its use in medicine. 17-year-old Alice Westrip has had severe epilepsy since she was 11, and MRI scans have recently revealed that the seizures are due to a brain tumour.
This bright area here is the area that is abnormal. What we need to do now is to determine how close that area to be removed is to parts that carry out vital functions.
it's been decided that the tumour can be removed, the bad news is that it's dangerously close to her optic nerve. The operation carries the risk of partial blindness. But for Ellis, it's a risk worth taking.
I'm trying to forget the risks and just think positive. The good things about having the surgery. I feel I'm going to get better. I can change my life back to how it was before. The epilepsy got so bad, I decided to leave school early because I couldn't cope anymore. I just got upset a lot that I was different. It did change my life a lot.
The tumour is buried 5 centimetres into Ellis's brain. In the past, patients undergoing this operation would have run a significant risk of suffering brain damage. But thanks to MRI, the risk to Ellis is greatly reduced. In a new use of MRI, the scans are mapped onto an image seen in the surgeon's microscope, and that will help him navigate past the healthy brain to remove the tumour, which is shown as a dotted line. After nearly 5 hours of surgery, the tumour is finally removed.
The specimen that's come out so far. The front is sort of 4 centimetres at the temple pole, which is exactly where the brain tumour is. I think the brain tumour is just in this bit here, right at the very bottom.
And then Ellis is scanned again to ensure that none of the tumour remains.
Pictures look amazing. Fantastic.
2 months later, and I'm off to visit Ellis on her 18th birthday.
Hello, happy birthday. Some flowers for you.
I'm delighted to see that she's made a full recovery. It's amazing that only a few weeks ago, before the operation, she was having up to 8 seizures a day.
Do you have any seizures at all? None at all. That's really changed your life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's miraculous to see how the surgeon's skill and MRI technology has totally transformed Ellis's life. The past 50 years has seen innovation, invention and discovery on an unprecedented scale. I'm choosing what I think are the very best, the top 10 scientific advances of the past half-century. So far, we've seen how the pill has revolutionized women's and indeed everybody's lives. We've looked at the almost miraculous effect of the microchip on, well, more or less everything. And we've marveled at our godlike ability to peer into the mind thanks to MRI scanning. There are still 7 of my top 10 to come. And after the programme, you'll get a chance to vote on which is your favourite, the best of the best. Meanwhile, on with the list. My 4th choice, which though rather familiar, has the potential to save the planet.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be without this, as one of my favourite inventions is the electric torch. But the great advance in the use of light came 50 years ago with the invention of a laser, which concentrates the light down a very narrow beam very precisely. It's the greatest advance in the technology of light since mankind lit its first candle.
A laser produces light that's so concentrated it can burn, cut and destroy. From the very beginning, this destructive power has sparked the imagination of science fiction writers. But the force can also be used for good, and that's why it's in my top 10.
Here's a laser
as a power of 1 watt, and if you don't want to use your energy to strike your match, you can just hold it in the beam of light. A 1 watt laser can light a match. Imagine then the power of a 500 trillion watt laser. That's exactly what they built here at the National Ignition Facility in California, where engineers have just finished constructing the laser to end all lasers. In fact, 192 of the world's most powerful lasers, all focused on the tiny hydrogen target. If they can be made to strike at the same time, and when I say the same time, I mean within 1 billionth of a second, then the energy inside the atoms will be released, creating in one moment 500 times more energy than the entire American national grid. This incredible energy release is from nuclear fusion.
What is fusion power?
Well, fusion power is what's going on inside the sun, right? And that is when we crush hydrogen together, we get this fusion to happen, we turn mass into energy, and that energy comes out, and if we can collect it and turn it into electricity, that's what we want to power our civilization. That's fusion power. That's what we hope to make happen in this target chamber. What is so exciting about this energy? We have no issue of pollution, and we have no issue of global climate warming. That is the dream. That has always been the dream of fusion energy, and hopefully we'll be able to do it here.
And no nuclear waste, of course.
And no nuclear waste, right. And I just know that in this facility in the next couple of years, hopefully one, we will find out that we can do it.
Effectively, within this chamber, Ed and his colleagues are trying to create and capture the power of a star by fusing protons in an atom, a source of energy so powerful that if it could be harnessed, it would provide the holy grail of cheaper, cleaner, renewable energy and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels.
What's utterly extraordinary is that all this energy that you're generating from this vast machine is actually in that.
Right.
Just show me that little capsule.
That capsule is where the hydrogen fuel resides. And it resides there at near absolute zero. And the laser light comes in and it heats up this can. When the shell explodes, that hydrogen implodes at nearly 1.5 million kilometers per hour. And that's how we get that fusion to happen.
The idea of using a laser to solve one of the great problems of physics, the production of green energy which might save the planet using nuclear fusion, that seems to be a really important reason for developing lasers.
It's interesting to remember that when lasers were invented, no one imagined how many uses we'd have for them. It's unfortunate but true that war is when we make some of our greatest advances. And my next owes much to conflict.
I was into some in Afghanistan. On patrol at night. Stepped on an IED. I remember seeing the flash, the feeling of going through the air landing, and I got blown about 15 feet away from the lads. I knew what happened straight away because I had to check myself, check if I still got all my fingers, all my hands, and I got to my leg and I thought, no, that ain't there, fair enough. And I checked my other leg and that was bleeding badly, all shattered bones and everything else, so I knew that probably wouldn't be there when I woke up. There you go.
Until recently, Sam would never have walked again. But now the science of biomechanics is getting closer than ever before to mimicking the complexity and sophistication of our own bodies. At Headley Court Military Rehabilitation Centre, doctors are helping hundreds of injured soldiers like Sam.
Sam, when were you injured?
Beginning of August.
So you're already walking?
Yep.
I mean, that's what, 5 months?
Like that, yeah.
Which is rather impressive.
Yeah.
But has that been a massive effort for you? Presumably it must have been.
More of a challenge, really. I've been trying to beat some para friends of mine, so...
Do you compete amongst yourselves?
Yeah, there's a lot of competition between us. Who can be out quickest?
As being soldiers, you tend to be competitive in your...
Absolutely, definitely.
Yeah.
The amazing thing about Sam's artificial legs is that they're controlled by a computer.
Where is the computer in this?
Right, it's just actually behind the knee joint here. In the shin we've got some strain gauges, and they give 50 readings per second back to the computer, which then regulates the hydraulics. And that's really what makes this knee so stable in normal walking.
In the early days, an injury like this would have resulted in what for Sam?
He'd have probably been sat in a wheelchair for most of his life. Now he spends pretty much all his time up on his legs, walking about.
So it's really life-changing.
Absolutely, yeah.
There isn't anything that you can't do now that you used to be able to do. Skiing, swimming, running, going on the bike.
So you'd expect to get back on the ski slopes, would you?
Absolutely, you got the right stuff, the right attitude, you can pretty much carry on with everything as good as before. Nothing stopping you.
And it isn't only wounded soldiers that are benefiting from this new technology. From head to toe, biomechanics is finding ways to repair and replace nature's finely tuned machine. The ambition for biomechanics is for prosthetics to be truly integrated, and for that they would need to be controlled by the user's mind. But until recently, interfering with the workings of the brain just wasn't an option. Today, that's all starting to change. The ability to delve into and manipulate the brain has many potential benefits, not only for the control of prosthetic limbs. Diane Heyer suffered from depression for more than 20 years. Her illness was so crippling that it even drove her to attempt suicide 3 times.
So tell me what it's like to be depressed.
It's awful. It's like being in a dark cave. Nobody around, cold, lonely. If you have depression, you have absolutely no desire to live. And it just is like that day after day after day. And actually, I guess I felt dead inside. I was like a living, talking, dead person. I tried several medications, and I also tried ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. That was pretty awful, too.
In a last-ditch attempt to control her depression, Diane underwent groundbreaking surgery in the hope of controlling her devastating depression. In a 5-hour operation, electrodes were directly inserted 8 centimeters into her brain. To check that the electrodes were in the correct position, Diane was woken up during the procedure so that the impulses could be adjusted.
When I woke up, they said, we're going to turn this on now, and you let us know how things are feeling. And at first I felt pretty warm, and then they turned it to another setting, and my heart was galloping.
How you feeling?
Starting to smile, feel happy. And then all of a sudden I just got this great big grin on my face. And after that, then they put me back to sleep so they could finish up the surgery.
So you immediately felt happy, did you, suddenly?
Oh, yes. For me, it was instantaneous.
What was that like?
Amazing. It was almost like my brain was doing gymnastics. It's how I used to feel when I would go to work and have good weekends and do things.
3 years later, and Diane lives with the system wired into her own body, much like a pacemaker.
And where do the wires run? So the control boxes in your chest, isn't it?
Right, yes. They start here and then they go down to the back of my skull and down the back of my neck and around, and then plug into a battery pack on my chest.
Does it worry you that you had a totally experimental thing inside your brain?
No, because it's been worth it.
From the very moment the electrodes were switched on, Diane's depression disappeared.
And of course your life has changed totally.
180 degrees.
Yeah.
I wake up every day and I think, what's today going to bring? I have an excitement about living again that I didn't ever have.
So you're the perfect bionic woman.
Yeah. Yes.
Even as a last resort, it seems utterly terrifying to think of thrusting an electronic device deep into the center of the brain in the way that's happened with Diane. But you can't knock it, because it's completely changed her life. Because of its power to transform lives, and potential to touch many others, Bionics definitely has a place in my top 10. Is it the most significant advance in the last 50 years? That's up to you to decide at the end of the program. Or maybe you'll go for my next choice. A remarkable invention that more than any other perhaps has caused change.
It's changed the way I work.
It's changed the way I find out about new art. Keep track of what my kids are doing.
Compare prices. Look at football scores. Talk to friends. Shut up again.
Raise money for charity.
Watch the news.
It's changed the way I do my research. In fact, it's changed our lives in 1,000 ways. I, for one, couldn't do without it. It is, of course, the World Wide Web. It's astonishing to think that the majority of us went online for the very first time just 10 years ago. My first contact with the internet was one day when I went into the lab and saw my Chinese PhD student typing on the screen, and there she was typing, and then suddenly she took her hands off the keyboard and some other letters appeared just underneath. What was happening, of course, was that she was communicating with somebody in Hong Kong. I thought, this will never take off. The World Wide Web required all the computers in the world to be able to talk to each other using one common language. But that was impossible until 1990, when a British scientist called Tim Berners-Lee figured out a way to link everybody up. Welcome to my world. He created a code allowing computers to share information. And suddenly, we could speak to each other. And a new age of communications began. Because the web was never patented, it is free and open to anyone to use. Today, 1.7 billion people use the web globally.
Hi everyone, today we're going to be doing a Hollywood lip look.
When you're poaching eggs without an egg poacher, it can get a little bit messy.
So if you can dance like this.
Not since the invention of the printing press have we seen such a leap forward in the amount of information freely available to everyone. And never before has there been such a platform for ordinary people to make their voices heard.
This is just my opinion. You disagree? Feel free.
It's how we communicate with friends. 1 billion of us use social networking sites, and 300 million meet people in a virtual world. Our children use it to interact, to learn and play. It's transformed news and information. In business, we've all become traders, buying and selling at the click of a button. For all of the risk of exposure to violence and pornography, worrying issues we have to face, the internet is one of the most significant advances of the past 50 years. And for me, the web is exciting because it allows all of us to participate in science like never before. Dr. Chris Lintott has the task of classifying over 1 million galaxies from photos taken by robotic telescopes. He was so overwhelmed by the amount of data that he enlisted thousands of online volunteers to help him. But the really exciting thing is that these armchair scientists made a new discovery.
A couple of years ago, a group of our volunteers noticed that in the background of some of the images there were these small, round, green objects. They called them peas, and they found a couple of hundred of them and came to us and said, well, what are these? And so we've looked at these with some of the world's largest telescopes, and they turn out to be galaxies undergoing a dramatic burst of star formation. These are the most efficient makers of stars anywhere in the local universe, and they've been missed by professional astronomers. It was only thanks to the help of 250,000 people, their armchairs and their internet connections, that they came to our attention.
Galaxy Zoo is just one of a host of projects inviting the public to get involved in science. Who knows what progress we could make through collaborations like these, made possible by the internet. This massive progress in how humans exchange information undoubtedly makes it one of the defining advances in the last 50 years. Does the far-reaching impact of the World Wide Web on all our lives make it the most significant advance? Or does the revolutionary joining of man with machine mean that biomechanics gets your vote? Could it be the promise of clean energy for us all that makes the laser your number one? Before you decide, there are 4 more advances to consider. The next one has the potential to change everything we've ever believed in. What distinguishes us from all other creatures? It's human inquisitiveness. Why are we here? Where we're going? What's our place in the universe? Looking down on the world from above, you realize just how insignificant we are. Since the dawn of time, people have marveled at all the vastness around us and wondered, how did it all begin? In the 1920s, American astronomer Edwin Hubble showed that the universe was expanding, and from this simple observation it was calculated that if you run the clock back, everything must have exploded into existence nearly 14 billion years ago in a Big Bang. For me, I suppose what I find so exciting about Big Bang is the ambition of the idea. Here is an idea which is not just about our planet or about our solar system, but unifies a whole notion of the universe. And it tells us about our beginnings, about where we came from, and possibly to where we're going. But the Big Bang Theory also predicted that the entire universe, all the planets and galaxies we see around us, exploded from nothing, which sounds crazy. When it was first proposed almost 100 years ago, the idea was controversial. But in the last 50 years, science has started to gather hard evidence that the Big Bang may not be such a crazy idea after all. In 1965, 2 radio astronomers working on this satellite antenna in New Jersey started to pick up a strange signal.
This radiation was coming from somewhere in really deep cosmic space, beyond any radio sources that any of us knew about or even dreamed existed.
The daring explanation for the radiation was that it might be the last remnant of the Big Bang echoing through space and time. perhaps. In 2001, the WMAP spacecraft analyzed this radiation and even produced a map of the early universe that seemed more or less to prove the Big Bang Theory. But unfortunately, as yet, it doesn't explain why the Big Bang banged in the first place. High in the Californian hills, at the Lick Observatory, astronomers are trying to calculate how fast the universe is expanding in the hope that they'll be able to shed some light on the problem. And in doing so, they've made a surprising discovery.
Everyone anticipated that gravity would slow down the expansion of the universe. So we were trying to measure how much the universe has been slowing down in order to predict whether it'll expand forever, though more and more slowly, or recollapse. Instead, we found that it's actually speeding up, not slowing down at all, an accelerating universe.
How does that work? Why should it do that, do you think?
Well, we think the universe is filled with some weird substance. We call it dark energy, but we know essentially nothing about it. So it's there, and it's in a sense gravitationally repulsive, causing space to expand faster and faster with time.
It's all very well to say the universe is expanding, but one of the questions I think will puzzle a lot of people, including me, is what are we expanding into?
Well, that actually puzzles all of us. We may be expanding into a bigger hyperspace, one with more dimensions, and there could be all sorts of universes expanding within this bigger space. And ours is just one of these universes in the multiverse.
Now, I accept that what you're doing is incredibly interesting, but it's useless, isn't it?
Well, in a sense it's useless, but the accelerating nature of the universe is important in part because it may help us understand the Big Bang. So it's the birth of the universe, and so we should try to understand how it is that it happened and how the universe has evolved since then. But that the data are indicating something weird is, I believe, not controversial at this stage.
Why is Big Bang in my 10 great ideas? Well, it's symbolic. It's symbolic of something which makes us uniquely human, our inquisitiveness, and it's that which drives us, through science, forward. We've had the audacity to tackle outer space, but we've had the nerve to take on inner space too. My final 3 advances are all about understanding us. Starting with the remarkable book published in the year 2000. 115 volumes like this contain the printout of the human genome from just one individual. 3 billion letters. It's the recipe for what makes you who you are.
It will revolutionize the diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of most, if not all, human diseases.
10 years ago, decoding the human genome was hailed by many as significant as putting a man on the moon, a symbol of hope for the new millennium. The reason for all the hope, and some would even say hype, was partly because of the enormous potential of gene therapy. Until recently, medicine could do nothing to restore broken or malfunctioning genes. But today, there are some procedures which can offer hope. 10-year-old Abdullahi is about to undergo an operation which might change his genetic destiny.
Abdullahi has poor vision, particularly poor night vision, because he lacks one of the genes essential for converting light energy into a nerve impulse. So the idea of this operation is to provide his retina with the correct functioning copy of that gene. And in order to do that, we package the genes themselves into a harmless virus. But to get the virus to the right place, we need to inject the virus underneath the retina.
Though his surgeon isn't certain how effective this cutting-edge treatment will be, without intervention, Abdullahi could eventually become totally blind. But what this remarkable procedure hopes to achieve is nothing less than delivering a new undamaged section of the DNA to do the work of Abdullahi's faulty gene. The good news is that since the operation, Abdullahi's vision has improved. It's a small step on the gene therapy journey, but its champions believe it could eventually have benefits for a great number of us. Goody, it's got hundreds and thousands of it, hasn't it? Like about 10% of children in the UK, Millie and Ruby suffer from asthma. But while both girls have the condition, Millie responds a lot better to medication than her sister. You've got a bit of a cough, haven't you? You always have a cough. For Ruby, attacks result in endless dashes to hospital and could be fatal.
Literally, there's nothing you can do to help your child. You just think at some point, is she going to stop breathing? They're coughing so much they're being sick, and then the breathing becomes worse, and then you know you're going to hospital basically, and it's the worst feeling you can ever imagine.
But Ruby's quite a resilient character.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. She's amazing. Even when she's at her worst, she'll give you a smile.
Millie and Ruby are taking part in a research project which is trying to discover why some patients are easier to treat than others.
Over 100,000 children in the United Kingdom with asthma carry a particular gene change which seems to make them much less responsive towards the commonest asthma reliever inhaler, the blue inhaler that we use.
Swabs are taken so that the girls' DNA, their genes, can be examined. The hope is that medicines can be matched to genes, and that the current trial and error approach of treating people like Ruby will be a thing of the past. The dream is that eventually we'll all be treated with medicines that are a perfect match for our own unique DNA. The technology that's developed since the Human Genome Project means that decoding an individual's genome is becoming easier and affordable. Genetic knowledge is a new frontier, and our understanding of how genes work is one of the most significant medical advances since the time of ancient Greece. The methods it employs have applications that will revolutionize the treatment of disease. Scientists working in this lab at Imperial College are trying to find a cure for a devastating human disease. But they're not developing medicines. They're trying to understand how to grow new tissues. My colleague Michael Schneider is a world leader in this research.
Wow.
And he and his team have made a remarkable advance. They've created beating heart cells from scratch.
When you first looked down the microscope and saw a heart cell beating, what was your reaction?
Well, when you see a cluster like this beating vigorously in the dish, it obviously stimulates your thinking about how to apply that information to the complicated task of cardiac muscle repair in a clinical setting. 10 days ago, those kinds of cells were undifferentiated embryonic stem cells that can become any cell in the body without restriction.
Stem cells are among the first cells produced when an egg is fertilized. Though they start off looking the same, they soon turn into very different things: bone, muscle, hair, teeth, nerves. All the different cell types that make up a human being. By understanding how these transformations work, scientists like Michael are trying to find out how to repair damaged or diseased organs.
So how important is this work in the field of stem cell biology?
Well, 40% of the people watching this program will die of cardiovascular disease. Taking that together with the fact that heart disease boils down to cell death without cell replacement, that makes cardiac repair by stem cells one of the most important and promising areas for stem cell research.
So far, there have been few treatments developed because of work on stem cells, but some researchers even hope that eventually they'll be able to grow replacement organs, or at least help the body repair itself.
A tiny minority are opposed to human embryo research because it damages human embryos. They have a point, but to my mind, it's actually an ethical imperative to try to save lives, and this is one way of doing it.
My final scientific advance is very close to my heart. It's something to which I've devoted most of my career. Every single one of these children's lives began in a test tube or a dish. They are IVF children. They come from eggs fertilized not in the womb, but in the laboratory.
So that was really frightening.
None of them would be here if it wasn't for scientific research into the earliest stages of life.
Well, it's sort of pink, yes, it's not really red. Would you allow pink then? No? You're very particular.
And although I was involved in that research, I have to confess that at the time, I didn't appreciate its significance.
I didn't think it was really going to be very important. I didn't think that IVF was a technology that would really make any difference to infertility treatment. Look how wrong I was. All these babies. There are about 1 million IVF babies around the world.
In the 1980s, my colleagues and I developed an experimental IVF technique to screen for genetic diseases in the developing embryo. Christine Mundy's first son, Justin, was severely handicapped, and it was discovered that she carries a genetic condition which means it's very likely that any of her male children would inherit the same problems.
We've been trying for 9 years for this breakthrough to come so we could have another chance.
In 1990, we screened her fertilized embryos to ensure that she had a girl. Rebecca is now 19.
Your mum was wonderfully brave. I don't know if you realise that, because what we were doing was a very, very experimental procedure, and we had no idea whether it was going to work or not. Do you remember we couldn't guarantee that you might not have a child that was affected?
No. To us it wasn't really brave, you know. The baby could have been damaged in some way, but I never ever worried about that side of it at all. I had my whole confidence that you would actually get it right.
Yeah, funny, isn't it? I don't think I had that confidence.
No, well...
Does having been born as a result of in vitro fertilization make you feel any different?
Quite humbled. For our family, it's been quite crucial for this breakthrough. You know.
Of course.
So I wouldn't have Rebecca today if it wasn't for that.
She doesn't always say that.
I mean, it's genuinely a very, very moving occasion, actually, to me. It's very special for me.
20 years ago, there was considerable opposition from people hoping to stop such work.
Is that you?
But in the UK, legislation was hugely positive. And it has enabled us to give hope, not just to many people like Christine, but also to hundreds of thousands of families who otherwise couldn't have had children. Well, that concludes my list. Now it's time for you to Radio say? Which of the 10 scientific advances that we've looked at do you think is the most important? Is it the millions of lives created by IVF? Or the huge promise of stem cell research? Is your favourite the life-saving MRI machine or the mighty microchip? Do you think the contraceptive pill has done more for us than the giant laser ever will? Or is it our ability to rebuild ourselves with bionics that inspires you the most? Can you say the global power of the internet beats the huge potential of understanding more about our genes? Or does the mind-boggling Big Bang Theory trump them all? Go to our website to vote for the scientific advance you think has been the most significant. Visit bbc.co.uk/science. There's a reminder of the top 10 advancements on the website. But before you vote online, I feel I should put my cards on the table.
Well, I'm reluctant to say which of these 10 advances is my greatest, but just possibly I might plump for research on Big Bang. It might seem useless, yet the knowledge it brings will almost certainly have unforeseen consequences for humanity. Just possibly, understanding the universe a little better will help our species to continue to flourish.
Discover more about the BBC Science World of Wonder. Go online now to bbc.co.uk/science. A magic trick that ended in murder. Skeptical minds take some convincing. In new tricks makes